In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello and welcome to The Paddock and the Pavilion. In today's show, recorded on the 1st of February, I went back to Barbados to speak to former England Test player Roland Butcher for his thoughts on England's exciting Test Series victory in Sri Lanka. Sadly, prior to release of the podcast, Captain Sir Tom Moore passed away on Tuesday afternoon. Captain Tom had become a national treasure and a household name after raising more than 32 million for the health service by walking 100 laps of his garden with his Zimmer frame, and was knighted for his fundraising efforts last July. As a Yorkshireman, Captain Tom was a massive cricket fan, and only last December he travelled to Barbados, where he met Roland and many other famous West Indian legends, including Sir Gary Sobers, Desmond Haynes and Joel Garner. I'm sure we'd all like to spare a thought for Captain Tom, his family and friends at this difficult time. Thank you, Captain Tom. You have been an inspiration to us all. Enjoy today's podcast. Hello, Roland. Welcome back to the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Stephen, it's a great pleasure to be back on. Haven't been for a little while, but I certainly enjoy having discussions with you.
Well, thank you. Last time it was the early part of September, and I hope you're keeping fit. And how does an former international cricketer keep fit these days?
Well, the situation now, I guess it's pretty much the same all around the world. Obviously, COVID hasn't left us since September, where we last spoke. So it's just really doing the things that the health officials ask you to do. We're about to go into a lockdown again from Wednesday because of some community spread. So really a lot of time is spent at home, and you just try to keep as busy as possible and as healthy as possible.
Well, that's good. Well, turning then to the heat of Sri Lanka, England won their 3-0 in 2018. But they lined up at Galle with only one day's practice, while the host had just come back from a thumping in South Africa. What were your expectations of the series before it started?
Before the series started, I really felt that England would have a very good chance of winning the series. Once they started the series well, it would be difficult for Sri Lanka then to respond. And I think for obvious reasons that England actually had a summer of international cricket, which meant they played test matches against West Indies and against Pakistan. So they were fairly active, and that would have prepared them for this series. Albeit then they had some one-day matches in South Africa before that was cancelled. But obviously South Africa, when they hosted Sri Lanka, that was the first time Sri Lanka had played for quite a while, and obviously they were well beaten in South Africa. So they would have come back home not really in a very confident mood. But at the same time, I guess they would be reasonably happy that the tour is at home in familiar conditions. But I think the experience of England playing over the summer and the successes that they had over the summer would have taken them into this series with a lot of confidence. And I expected them to perform well.
But was the tone of the series then set when Sri Lanka got bowled out for only 135 in the first test?
Well, that showed really the nervousness in the Sri Lankan camp, because it wasn't just the fact that they were bowled out so cheaply, it was in the manner that they were dismissed. And I think that would have been disconcerting really for the coach, and it really signaled what was to come. I mean, you would have expected that throughout the series their performances would improve. But after such a dismal start, then it became really impossible for them to get their game back on track in a very short series. Had it been a 5-test series, then there was possibility of coming back. But in a short series like this one, with a dismal start like that on day one, really you're up against it.
And are we seeing some of these low scores in Test cricket because of the influence of all this T20 and even T10 cricket nowadays?
I think there are two reasons. The T20 and the T10, yes. But I think the biggest reason right now, I think, is COVID, because it means that a lot of teams are inactive for long periods. And, when was the last time Sri Lanka played before they played in South Africa? I would think it was a very, very long time ago. And also COVID had affected the training regimes of the teams. So a lot of teams are going into series underprepared, and not just necessarily underprepared net-wise, but certainly match practice. They haven't had a lot of match practice, so you will get up and down performances. Some days they'll perform well, other days they'll perform poorly. I think England, out of all the teams, have had the most matches. So, and it was only a few months ago that they really stopped playing. So for them, I think the transition is a lot easier. In terms of the T20 and then coming into Test cricket, well, Kane Williamson showed that there's no problem coming from T20 to Test match cricket, because in the series against West Indies, he came straight from the IPL, didn't play a game, and his next innings was a Test match. He scored 250, and then followed that up in another series there with another 200. So, if you are a good player, the adjustment comes very easily.
Well, England responded with 421 with their key man, their captain, Joe Root, who scored a double century. How impressed were you with Joe Root?
Very impressed. I think, to get a double century on the subcontinent is not easy. In any conditions, very difficult to do. Joe Root, as captain, obviously he led from the front, and had he failed, the confidence could have drained from the side as well. So it was important for him personally and for the team that he performed well. The fact that he performed in such a sterling manner, I think, would have lifted the rest of the team for the rest of the series, and to some degree would have deflated Sri Lanka, that the captain of the opposition team was in such fine form. So, that double 100 by Root really ensured that, England were going to take charge of the series.
It must be really hard to bat and concentrate in that heat and humidity.
Absolutely. Okay, there's no crowds, but, the pressure and intensity of the game is still there. International cricket is very high pressured, and as I said, even with no fans and the stifling heat, he would have had to really work hard, concentrate hard. If you look through the rest of the England innings, there were very few contributions, so it really showed the magnitude of that innings by Root in that first innings that really set England on its path.
Yeah, Dan Lawrence on debut got 73. How high do you rate Joe Root against the other sort of stars of today?
Root is obviously a very talented batsman. I think over the last couple of years, he has fallen just really below the standard of a Kohli and a Williamson and a Steve Smith to some degree. But I think, before that, he was very much up there. I think he's got a chance now to really rebuild that reputation and, come up trumps when his team needs him. And that's what Kohli and Williamson and Smith has done for the last few years. When the team really needed them, they have been the key players. I think for the last couple of years, Root's been, his performance has been in and out. Some days he's been really good, and other days, fairly average. But, he's got the class, and he's shown it over the years that he's that quality of player that, he can get back there.
Well, Sri Lanka fought back in that Test match in the second innings, getting 359, but England went on to win by 7 wickets. In the second Test, another key man, apart from Joe Root, who got another 180, was Jimmy Anderson, who got 6 for 40 in 29 overs. Quite remarkable figures in the subcontinent.
It was, but let's go back to the first test before we talk about the
Sure.
second. Mustn't forget the performance of Don Bess, who really was in England against West Indies, looked an ordinary off-spin bowler. You would have expected that in these conditions that, he would be a much more threatening bowler. But I think his contribution in the first test match really, ensured that he was going to enjoy the rest of the series. So you've got to credit his performance along with Roots in that first test, and of course Dan Lawrence. Coming to the second test now, some changes made, and Jimmy Anderson continued to show why he's such a quality bowler over a long period of time. By in conditions perhaps not suited to fast bowling, was able to put in a fantastic performance, and as you said, another sterling effort by Root as well.
How long do you think Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad, who'd bowled well in the first test, can carry on playing for England?
I think they can continue for many years because England have got quite a good lineup of fast bowlers. So if they're sensible, they can rotate these players, use the various conditions that they're going to play in, and ensure that people like Broad and Anderson can go on for many years. That will be to the advantage of England if they can do that. They've still got Wood, they've still got Wokes, they've got Joe Archer, and some of the other young fast bowlers coming through. So, right now the stock looks good. And if you've got two players with over 1,000 test match wickets who can still perform, you've got to involve them somewhere along the line when you need them. I guess when you come back to England this summer, both of them will play a vital role again in the team because, again, conditions. Sometimes what you'll have to do is, when you go on certain tours, maybe use them sparingly and use the other fast bowlers. But in English conditions, two names really go on the list first.
And in this test match, Sri Lanka did much better in the first innings, with Angelo Matthews making a century. But of course, it all went wrong for them in the second innings when they collapsed again for a very poor score in sort of less than 40 overs.
Yes, you would have expected them to fight back. Within the side, they've still got some quality batsmen, and Matthews is one of them, and he showed it in this test. In that test, he got a very good 100. So they've got some capable batsmen. Again, the spinners this time Leach came to the party as well with Bess, and the spinners caused the problems, and that second innings collapse really was something that they didn't expect, but you can understand why it happened because the lack of cricket that they've had, certainly in the last 8 to 9 months, actually told in that. So when a team doesn't get the chance to play or practice much, you would expect that, 1 or 2 innings they will probably perform, and that's exactly what happened in this series. They just performed, in the one innings. The next innings, whether that was first innings or second innings, then they would have had problems, and that went to script really, and England ran out easy winners.
Yeah, 6 wickets, with Sibley getting a half century in the second innings, and also Josh Buttler, who impressed behind the wickets as well during the series.
Yeah, that was important. Sibley up until that point had an average series, even though it's a short series. So the fact that he was able to get a half century and remain not out, and England win the game chasing a small target, that would do his confidence a lot of good. Josh Buttler, obviously, he contributed as well throughout the series, both in front of the stumps and behind the stumps. So, that argues well for England. The openers had a rough time, and on the subcontinent, somebody has a rough time. There's no question about that in any series. And it just so happened to be the openers, Crawley, on this occasion that he didn't really get any scores. But a good performance by England all round.
You think England are an improving side then?
Yeah, most definitely. I don't think they're the complete article yet, because there's still question marks really in the opening department. The fact that if you're still gonna, if you have to open with Zach Crawley, who's perhaps not an opener in international cricket, you have to open with him on the subcontinent. it tells you that there's still room for improvement at the top of the order. So, obviously Burns will come back at some point visibly. That partnership really needs some more work. So, and obviously with, you've got the Stokes. Obviously Stokes coming back into the side again, strengthens the side. The plus really will be that, if the spinners continue to improve, then, that would add to the balance of the team.
And what about Sri Lanka? Any bright spots for them? Dinia, the left armer, bowled well.
Yeah, the left armer. Yeah, he bowled well, so that's a good find. But what Sri Lanka needs, they've got good cricketers. What they need is more cricket, and at some point this year, they will perform well against some team, but they need more cricket at this point in time. They're always very competitive, particularly at home. And, obviously with Matthews and Chandimal and others like that, they've got some quality players.
And how would you have found batting with young Dick Weller behind the sticks, chattering away? It was quite amusing on television.
Yeah, he's a good cricketer. I think he's underperforming at the moment. I think his batting is pretty good. So he's an important player, for Sri Lanka. Obviously, the figures haven't shown his value just yet, but, I think he's young enough also to make a meaningful contribution to the team. So the prospects for him are pretty good. And Sri Lanka, they're a team, I wouldn't say they won't be a top team for obvious reasons. They've lost, obviously, some of the star players that they've had over the years. And the likes of Sangakkara, Jayawardene, Jayasuriya, Russell Arnold and people of Dilshan. Those were top quality players. So any team that loses that sort of quality will find it hard to replace it. But within the side, they've still got some good players. And, Dick Weller is one of them.
And now England go off to, now actually in India, who've won 28, I read, of their last 34 home tests and only lost one of them. What are England's prospects in India?
Well, this is going to be a very tough series for England. They would expect it. I think if you take India's record at home, which is quite formidable, and you add to that what actually just took place in Australia, the way they came from, they will go into this series against England with a lot of confidence. I don't think they'll underestimate England because they will know the strength of the side over the last few years that they are a formidable team. But I think India would also feel very confident at home playing against, England, who are top side. It's going to be a very, very interesting series. I would say at this point in time, India really would be favourites. England would have to play, I think, above themselves. It will be close. There's no question about that. I don't think there was going to be huge margins between the two teams, but I think India's record, the depth of quality in the side, could just about edge this series.
Yes, because in the recent Australian series, the India nearly putting out a second team to beat Australia in that final test at the Gabba.
Yeah, that was an incredible performance. They had no choice but to put out that team. There was nowhere else to go. With players calling home, injuries, etc. They just really had to thrust the youngsters in, and they didn't disappoint. The youngsters came in like Shubman Gill and Siraj and others and performed really out of their skins. And then the experienced players of Rahane, Pujara, and then Pant ensure that India put up that performance in the final test match, which really still to this precise moment, you're still scratching your head to ask yourself, well, did that really happen? And it did happen. And, so they've shown that the depth of their cricket is something that perhaps most of the other teams now will struggle with.
But do you think now with COVID, that's sort of illustrating the depth that the big three, England, Australia and India, have got as an advantage over all the other test-playing nations?
Most definitely. The big three were always out in front of the rest for many reasons. I think, finance has been a huge reason why those teams have been able to get ahead of the others. They can invest in technology and science and everything else, which the others can't. So had a huge head start. And, come COVID, when you've got a huge bench, like both of those teams have, it makes it quite easy that when players are missing, that they can bring players in. Just take a look at the West Indies now in Bangladesh. You lose the top players and suddenly you see what you're left with. So teams like West Indies and others during this COVID period will suffer greatly because their reserve bench just doesn't have the sort of strength that an India, Australia and England has.
And what are your thoughts on selection now with people coming in and out of bubbles? Because England have got Joss Buttler for just this first test in India, and Johnny Bairstow went home and then is coming back.
Well, these are the times. That's how it is now. I mean, if things were normal, you wouldn't see these sort of things happening. But these are abnormal times. So you will see, players coming and going. Some players will be refused support because, of fears of COVID. Also, the rotation of players, teams will use the opportunities, to rotate players more. So, it's a sign of the times. And right now, I think we're expecting that to happen for a little while now. And really, all we can do is hope that, COVID goes away in a speedy manner so we can get back to some sort of normality. But for the time being, all sorts of things are possible.
And the West Indians that came over to England, did you get a chance to speak to them and ask them what it was like living in a bubble?
Yes, like everyone else who's in a bubble, it's pretty tough because, basically it is not the norm. The norm is that individually, you can do as you please. In a bubble situation, there are restrictions. And the restrictions for obvious reasons. So it means that you can no longer do what you want to do or what you would like to do. And that can be quite tough. But there's a reality about this situation. If there is no bubble, there's no cricket. Your job is one of playing cricket. So, it is something that you may not like, but right now, that's what it is. And you have to make the most of it. The only question really is, it comes down to, how much is enough? If you've got 3 or 4 back-to-back tours very, very quickly, it is possible that burnout can take place amongst the players who perhaps feel that because of the restriction that, they're not able to take it anymore. It will be interesting to see how the West Indian players actually react to the next 3 or 4 months, because there's about 4 tours to the Caribbean in the first half of the year. You've got Sri Lanka, you've got Australia, you've got South Africa, and then you've got Pakistan. So there's 4 tours to the Caribbean, and the way the Caribbean is right now, all of those will be played in biosecure environments. So it will be interesting to see. Not necessarily the overseas players. I mean, obviously some will refuse to come, but the question will be, for these 4 series, that the West Indian players will be in those biosecure environments. So it'll be interesting to see how, even at home, they will feel about being in that environment. I expect that at some point it will be similar to Bangladesh, where the environment itself, not necessarily the country, just the environment that they have to operate in, will become too much for some of these players.
Yeah, it must be a balance. It's good to see that there's going to be some Test cricket back in the West Indies. I'd heard that Sri Lanka were going. I didn't realise all these other countries were coming over as well.
Yeah, straight after each other.
Oh, that's good to hear. Just talking about the West Indies, the West Indies went out to New Zealand, and lost heavily in the Test series and lost the T20 series. What was the reaction back in the Caribbean to that?
Well, the reaction amongst the ordinary fan, obviously not happy because they want West Indies to win, but the reaction by people who actually understand cricket and understand international cricket, understand where West Indies is in relation to the other teams in world cricket, would know that really West Indies had no chance of beating New Zealand in New Zealand. New Zealand record is formidable at home against the West Indies. So West Indies have been beaten and beaten well by New Zealand in the past. In New Zealand, where West Indies have had very, very good teams. So the fact that you've got a team who, for the last 20 years, have been struggling, and players also drop out, it's inevitable that they would get beat. I don't think people really expected the margins of defeat. I mean, that might have been surprising, but certainly you would have expected that they would not win the series in New Zealand, and that's the way it turned out. New Zealand played some excellent cricket and beat them quite easily.
And now, as you say, they're in Bangladesh, and the Test series starts, I think, on Wednesday this week.
Yeah,
How do you think they'll go there? There's several players are not in Bangladesh as well, are they?
Again, they will struggle. I mean, I don't expect that they will win the series in Bangladesh. Bangladesh will be very strong at home. They've got some top players who would get in most teams around the world. I mean, you've got Tamim Iqbal, Shakib, Mamadullah. They've got some, they've got good players, guys who have played a lot of international cricket with a great deal of success. And at home, particularly, the spin bowlers do well. West Indies don't play the spin particularly well. So I would expect that would be a troubling thing for them. And also, you notice for a number of years now, West Indies struggled to make runs. So that doesn't argue well for them. The faster bowlers have got them out of difficulties in the last few years. But the faster bowlers, I think, will be fairly muted in Bangladesh. I don't think the pitches are going to suit them. The other thing is, are the West Indies spinners of enough quality to bowl out Bangladesh cheaply? Surely Bangladesh batters will play the spin a lot better than the West Indies will. So I would expect an extremely tough campaign in Bangladesh, and Bangladesh really must be the favourites.
Because you're missing Jason Holder, Shea Hope, and Roston Chase are not there, are they?
Yeah, I mean, and then you add all the others. I mean, there's about 8 or 9 of them missing, so it's going to be, there's going to be people on that tour making international debuts, the likes of Kyle Mears and Kevin Hodge and people like that will be playing for the first time. So, that's tough in itself. But to be in Bangladesh with those conditions against those quality of players will make it extremely difficult for those players and for the team.
Well, I think the test starts on the 3rd of February, so good luck to the West Indies there. Another person that you met quite recently, I just wanted to mention and spare a thought for today, is Captain Sir Tom Moore, who's just been admitted to Bedford Hospital with COVID. I'm sure we'd all like to wish him a speedy recovery.
Most definitely, yeah. I was fortunate to meet Sir Tom while he was here on his visit to Barbados, and what a great man he is. Got the news yesterday that he had tested positive and was receiving treatment. All I can do with everyone else really is to wish him a very speedy recovery. Sent a message to his daughter yesterday to convey that same message, and I hope that he can get back on his feet, so to speak, as quickly as possible, because he really has been an inspiration to not just people in England, but I think around the world, as to the human spirit, and he really typifies that.
Oh, thank you for that. There were some lovely photos of you and several other West Indian legends with Sir Tom before Christmas. Yes,
while he was here, it was organised for him to have a visit to Kensington Oval, and yes, all the legends were assembled to meet him. He's a guy that, he loves his cricket. Barbados was a place that was always on his bucket list, and even though he had to wait till his 100th year to make the trip to Barbados, he was so delighted to be there, and also the fact that, he was able to come to a very famous cricket ground. Unfortunately, there was no cricket going on at the time, but, he still got the opportunity to meet and interact with some of the legends of the game. So it was a memorable trip for him and for all of us.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you again for being on the Paddock and the Pavilion. Enjoy the sunshine in Barbados, and we'll put up with the cold and possible more snow here back in the UK. Yes,
Stephen, it's a great pleasure. Always good to talk to you. Maybe the next time we speak, you might want to talk about an England away victory. So, that's something to look forward to.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Pad and Pav.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.